A millionaire left his safe open on purpose, just to test his black maid. What she did next shocked him so badly, he couldn't speak. Before we go any further, please hit the subscribe button. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Now, let's begin. Richard Holloway was a man who trusted numbers more than people. At 48, he was one of the wealthiest men in Colorado, owner of Holloway Steel, a company that built half the bridges and skyscrapers across the West. His mansion sat alone on a quiet hill outside Aspen, wrapped in pine trees and silence, just the way he liked it. To the world, Richard Holloway was disciplined, sharp, untouchable. But inside, he carried something heavier than money, deep suspicion. It came from betrayal. Years ago, his business partner had emptied an account and disappeared overnight. Since then, Richard believed one thing. Everyone had a price. Especially people who worked for him. That belief was why, one cold Monday morning, Richard did something no millionaire in his right mind would ever do. He left his safe open. The safe was hidden behind a large painting in his private study, a heavy steel vault that held more than money. Inside were bundles of $100 bills, gold bars, old family documents, and a black envelope containing account codes worth millions. Richard normally checked it 3 times a day. But today, before leaving for a meeting in Denver, he deliberately spun the wheel halfway and walked away. He didn't close it. He didn't lock it. He didn't even pull the painting back into place. Then he turned on the hidden cameras and waited. The only person left in the mansion that day was Grace Miller. She was the black maid. Grace had worked in the Holloway mansion for 3 years. She arrived every morning before sunrise and left quietly before dusk. She spoke little, moved softly, and never met Richard's eyes for long. To Richard, she was polite, efficient, invisible, and, if he was being honest, suspect. People like her, his late father used to say, don't stay poor because they are honest. Richard hated himself for thinking that way. But the thought stayed. That was why he was testing her. Grace didn't know the safe was open when she entered the study to dust. She hummed softly as she worked, wiping the shelves, straightening the books Richard never read, careful not to disturb anything. She had learned early that in rich houses, touching the wrong thing could cost you your job. As she moved the cloth across the desk, her eyes caught something unusual. The painting was slightly tilted. Grace frowned. She reached up, intending only to straighten it, but as she adjusted the frame, it swung open. And there it was. The safe. Open. Her breath caught. Grace froze. Inside the vault, stacks of money sat openly, neat and perfect. Gold glinted under the study lights. It looked unreal, like something from a movie. She stepped back quickly. Her heart began to race. This is not my business, she whispered to herself. But her eyes returned to the open safe again. Just one bundle of cash could change everything. It could pay off her medical bills. It could fix her leaking roof. It could buy the insulin her mother rationed every month. Grace swallowed hard. Her fingers trembled. From a screen miles away, Richard watched. He leaned forward in his chair, jaw tight. Here it comes, he thought. Everyone breaks eventually. He zoomed in. Grace stood still for a long moment. She didn't move closer. She didn't reach out. Instead, she slowly closed her eyes. Then she surprised him. Grace walked out of the study. Richard blinked. What? He muttered. Minutes passed. She didn't return. Richard felt irritation crawl up his spine. Maybe she's calling someone, he thought. Or waiting until she's sure no one's watching. Then Grace came back. But she wasn't empty-handed. She carried a thick cloth. And a small handwritten note. Grace approached the open safe carefully, like someone standing near a sleeping lion. She draped the cloth gently over the vault, covering the money completely. Then she taped the note to the edge. Her handwriting was neat but firm. Richard zoomed in further. His chest tightened as he read the words. Sir, your safe is open. I covered it so no one would be tempted. Including me. Grace stepped back. She bowed her head slightly toward the covered safe. Then she straightened the painting. And walked away. Richard Holloway felt something crack inside him. He sat back slowly. Speechless. This wasn't how the test was supposed to go. No hesitation. No theft. No secret phone call. Just integrity. Raw. Quiet. Unadvertised. He replayed the footage again. And again. Then his eyes fell on the words. Including me. Richard swallowed. For the first time in years, shame burned in his chest. That evening, Richard returned home earlier than usual. Grace was in the kitchen, scrubbing the counter. She stiffened when she saw him enter. He almost never came home before sunset. "Good evening, sir," she said politely, lowering her eyes. Richard didn't answer right away. He walked past her, straight to the study. The cloth still covered the safe. The note still hung there, exactly as she had left it. Richard stood there for a long moment. Then he turned. "Grace," he called softly. She appeared in the doorway, hands clasped nervously. "Yes, sir?" Richard looked at her, really looked. Not as staff, not as background noise, but as a woman who had just done something most people with power never would. "Did you see the safe today?" he asked. Grace nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." "And you didn't take anything?" "No, sir." "Why?" Grace hesitated. Then she lifted her eyes and said something that hit him harder than any betrayal ever had. "Because I know what it feels like to lose everything. And I would never become rich by becoming empty." Richard Holloway opened his mouth, and no words came out. He had tested her character, but instead, she had exposed his. And as he stood there in silence, something inside Richard began to change, something dangerous, uncomfortable, and long overdue. Because the safe was no longer the most valuable thing in the house. And Grace Miller was no longer just the maid. Richard Holloway stood in the doorway of his study long after Grace left. The silence felt different now. Not empty, heavy. He reached for the note again, his fingers brushing the paper like it might burn him this time. "Including me." Those two words echoed louder than any accusation ever could. Richard had spent his life building walls, contracts, locks, guards, and codes. He believed wealth demanded distance. That power survived only when you trusted no one. Yet a woman who scrubbed his floors had shattered that belief with one quiet decision. That night, Richard barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Grace's hands trembling, not with greed, but restraint. He remembered the way she stood, alone in that massive study, staring temptation in the face, and walking away. By morning, he had made a decision. Grace arrived at the mansion just before dawn, as usual. She tied her apron, hung her coat, and went straight to work. Nothing about her routine changed, because she never expected anything to. People like Richard Holloway didn't reward honesty. They expected it. She was dusting the dining room when she heard his voice behind her. "Grace." Her shoulders stiffened. "Yes, sir," she said, turning slowly. Richard stood there, not in his suit, not on the phone, not distracted. Just him. "I need you to sit with me for a moment." Grace's heart skipped. Had she done something wrong? She wiped her hands nervously and followed him into the study. The safe was now locked. The painting restored. Richard gestured toward a chair. "Please." She sat carefully, hands folded in her lap. Richard didn't sit behind his desk. He pulled a chair across from her. At eye level. "I owe you an apology," he said. Grace blinked, unsure she'd heard correctly. "Sir. I left that safe open on purpose." Her eyes widened slightly. "I wanted to see what you would do." The words landed hard. Grace swallowed. "So, you tested me?" "Yes." Her chest tightened. Years of being watched. Judged. Assumed. She nodded once. "I understand." "No," Richard said quickly. "You don't. Because I was wrong." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I believe that money reveals who people truly are. That when temptation appears, character disappears." Grace said nothing. "And yesterday," he continued, voice thick, "you proved me wrong." For the first time, Grace looked directly at him. "You didn't trust me," she said softly. Richard nodded. "I didn't." "That hurt," she admitted. Richard closed his eyes briefly. "I know." There was a long pause. Then Richard reached into a folder on the desk and slid it toward her. Grace didn't touch it. "What is this, sir?" "A new contract," he said. "Effective immediately." She hesitated, then opened it. Her breath caught. The numbers didn't make sense at first. Then they did. "Sir, this salary, this must be a mistake." "It's not." Grace's hand shook. "You're offering me, this is more than triple what I earn. And full medical coverage," he added quietly, "including your mother's treatments." Tears welled in her eyes. "How did you know about my mother?" Richard lowered his head. "I should have known earlier. I should have asked." Grace wiped her face quickly, embarrassed. "Why are you doing this?" Richard met her gaze. Because integrity deserves recognition. And because trust, real trust, should be repaid, not exploited. She shook her head in disbelief. I didn't do what I did for money. I know, he said softly. That's why you deserve it. But Richard wasn't finished. There's more. He slid another document across the desk. Grace frowned as she read the heading. Holloway Family Foundation, Board Appointment. Her eyes lifted slowly. You want me on this? The foundation oversees millions in scholarships, housing programs, and grants, Richard said. I want someone with a conscience at the table. Someone who knows what temptation looks like and chooses better. Grace stood abruptly. Sir, I clean houses. I'm not educated like. You are wiser than most people. I've paid fortunes to advise me, Richard interrupted gently. Silence fell. Grace's voice broke. I've been invisible my whole life. Richard stood too. Then let me be the man who finally sees you. News of Grace Miller spread quickly. Not as gossip. As legend. Staff whispered about the maid who walked away from millions. Business partners scoffed, until Richard publicly announced her appointment at a board meeting. When someone dared to question him, Richard responded simply. She guarded my wealth better than anyone I ever hired. Grace used her position quietly. She funded scholarships for children of domestic workers. She built clinics in forgotten towns. She paid nurses fairly. And she never once touched money she didn't earn. Years later, when Richard passed away peacefully in his sleep, his will shocked the nation. Grace Miller inherited the mansion. Not because she was loyal. Not because she was poor. But because she was honest. And in the letter he left behind, Richard wrote, I spent my life protecting my money. Grace taught me how to protect my soul. Moral of the story. True character is revealed when no one is watching. Wealth can be locked away, but integrity must live in the heart. Sometimes, the greatest treasure isn't what's inside the safe. It's the person who refuses to open it.